Hello and welcome to Findlay Designs. Today's video is on how I created this resin sculpture. It was created using polystyrene packaging and bin liners. So I created my own mould and then built the layers to create this piece. So it's actually, it was quite an interesting piece. This was the very first video I created using resin, and I've redone the intro because it was initially done for the patrons on my Patreon account, but now that I've closed that account, I've redone the intro. So anyway, so without further ado, let's get into how I created this resin sculpture. So getting started, I used a polystyrene panel that came out of some packaging that my son had from a desk that he bought for his bedroom. So it was a perfect shape and size to use. I very quickly scribbled out the layout. I had a rough idea on where I wanted, so just using a pen, I just sketched it out just so that I got the right shape that I wanted. Nothing too fancy, just a very simple design, because at the end of the day it was just an experiment. Once I was happy with that design, I started cutting out the shape just using a sharp blade, and be very careful not to cut my fingers. So we just cut that shape out until when it was ready to use. So once I had the shape that I wanted and I was happy with, and I trimmed off the excess that I didn't need, using just a bin liner, I just covered the front, just pushing down slightly to get a feel of the shape in there before then pouring in a layer of resin. The resin, I've just used a very small hint of blue in there because I wanted a slight blue tint. So for that I used 1 drop of India ink in there, just to give it a bluey tint, but not enough that it actually made it blue. It just gave it that sort of water feel. And then using a stick, I just poked around, layering it down as flat as possible. But because it was an experiment, I wasn't too worried about the actual finish of it. So it was just to get the shape in and then just move things around a little bit until I was happy. Again, I put another layer of resin on there, as you can see. All up, I think I've used about 2 litres of resin. So, because the thing itself is, I think it was about 25mm thick, 35mm, something like that. So, and just using the stick, I just tried to make sure the corners were filled, and then using the air gun, it just popped the bubbles and just made sure there was no bubbles there. The next step was to start layering some colour. I used just some black acrylic ink paint, just mixed in with the resin, and it was a bronzy colour that I used, and turquoise, which was pigments rather than paint, which I mixed in the resin, but it was just a small amount because I only wanted to tint the area, because I wanted to still have that translucent look once it was cured. So while it was laying on the top, I just mixed it around a little bit just to create a little bit of interest, and just moved it into the corners as much as I could. And then again, using the heat gun, I just popped any bubbles and just moved it around a little bit. We're using the heat gun into areas, it helped bring some of the bronze and turquoise to the front and made the black drop down a bit. I did actually melt a little bit of the plastic bag there, which was, not ideal, but these things happen. Now I went away and I let this cure for an hour, but when I come back and tried to lay the stones over it, I realised that because the resin was so thick, it actually cured very, very quickly within that hour. So I sprinkled it around and I found a few wet places around the edge which I was able to let the stones sink in a little bit, particularly in the corners. But for the majority of the rest of it, the resin was already cured. So that was one learning curve for me, is realising that when you're doing quite thick resin, it cures really, really quickly. And I also noticed that the colours had dissipated quite a bit and it had spread to the edges, which was something that I wasn't aware would happen, but now with the beauty with experimenting is you find that out. So with that, I decided to pour another layer of resin just so that I could put the stones on the top. The thing with doing it this way is the stones will sit on the top and not sink into the piece. So, but that was fine. If I wanted the stones to be more through it, then I would need to pour stones more regularly and maybe layer it a bit more frequently and do it in smaller layers rather than try and do a full pour in one go. But again, this is something you learn through experimenting. So what I'm doing now is I'm just placing the stones around the edge, making sure that they go right up to the edge and that they're covered in the resin. So I'll use my fingers to just make sure that they are covered. Now I've left the resin to cure for about half an hour before doing this, just so that it was a little bit thicker. So it means that I can still work with it. I can move the resin and coat the stones, but it's not running off too much, because I don't know if you can notice right in the centre there, the resin did run into the middle a bit, but that's fine. We can trim that off later once it's cured. So again, using my fingers, I'm just making sure all the stones are covered in resin and that they're set and they're in the position that I want them. And as you can see, it's lost a little bit of its shine because they've sunk into the resin, and I'm just going to go over it now and pop any air bubbles with the heat gun. So now that it's cured, it's been left for overnight. So this is the next day, and now demoulding it. And the centre bit was quite difficult because I'd melted the bag. It actually stuck, so it took a little bit of demoulding it from that area. And when you turn it over now, when I take this plastic bag off, you will see that the polystyrene and the bag was stuck in that area, but using a little bit of force I was able to remove that. But I'm not too worried about it because I'm going to trim that centre bit away, so that's fine. It's not an issue. So as you can see, this is what it's looking like before it's been tidied up. So what I'm doing now is I'm just heating the edges and I'm just breaking off any excess resin. You can use a knife and things, but I tried using a knife on this one, but because there was quite a lot of stones, it was quite hard to get a nice clean edge. So I found that using my fingers to just break it off, I got a better result. So so it was a little bit, again, it's a little bit of experimentation to see how you get on, but you'll find the best way for you. You'll see that by just heating it up, it just gives it a little bit more flexibility and it makes it a little bit easier to break off. So I'll go around the whole edge now and trim that excess off until I've got a nice shape. Now we're into the centre bit, and as I mentioned before, you'll see that once you heat it, it actually rips off quite easily. So while I did try and use the knife, I abandoned that idea and went on to just using my fingers to rip the edges, because at the end of the day I'm going to pour another layer to fix any imperfections and give it a nice shine. So I was not too worried about that. So it's just, yeah, it's just working your way around and just ripping off and getting rid of the excess. And it's still leaving behind some of the stones hanging over, so it did actually give it a nice effect doing it that way. So yeah, just continued all the way around until all that excess resin was removed. So now I'm quite happy with the shape that I've got here. It still has a few imperfections. You'll see around the side here that I've got the shape of the plastic bag on here, but I'm not too worried, because what I'm going to do next, I'm actually going to pour another layer of resin over this, because I want to take the stones on this particular side out further to that edge, so it's not as noticeable. So this one I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a moat. Is it a moat? Well, a barrier, a bridge, whatever you want to call it, for the resins around the edge. I'm just going to mask that off and then pour another layer of resin. But what I'm going to do is I'm not going to leave the tape on for too long. The tape's going to be left on for an hour, just enough to thicken the resin up, but not too much that it doesn't move. And then I'll remove that tape to allow it to flow over the side, and I will then add some more stones to finish off the area. And you know what the resin does as well, on the edges where the plastic bag was, it left like a matte finish because the bag wasn't completely glossy. So the resin then just shines that up again and gives it that nice glossy finish. So as I'm finishing off the tape here, I'll get it prepared, put it on top of some things, for want of a better word, to raise it up off the side. As you can see, the way it was running off the side a little bit there, I then decided that I needed to create a bit more of a dam on that edge, and you'll see shortly that I use some cups to stop the tape from falling off and all the resin falling off. But again, you just improvise and do what you need to do to get the job done. Just drinking my coffee. Thank you for those who've purchased a coffee for me. That's lovely. So now that's been left to cure for an hour, I'm now removing the tape. The resin is still very wet, but it has thickened up slightly, so I've got a nice thick piece on the top, and it will very slowly run over the sides. I'll just remove this plastic bag because it is covered in resin from where it flowed over the side, and I'm just raising up the edges so that it's not going to be sitting on the plastic sheet, so it'll create you're not going to have it sticking. That's what I don't want it to do. So all I'm doing now is I'm just, any of the stones that fell off before, I'm just adding them and putting some extra stones on to the edges where I feel it needed to be finished off. It wasn't quite done, so just using my fingers to dip in the resin and coat those stones just so that they can adhere to the other piece, but also I can get it as close to the edge as possible and maybe just hang a little bit over the sides. So I'll just go around and just fix up any areas that need doing, like the corners here, and anywhere else that needs doing. So I'll just go around and inspect it, and the beauty with the resin still being wet at the moment, I can fix up these areas and just give it the look that I want it to have. Well, so this is the finished piece. It's been left for 24 hours to cure. As you can see, it's turned out quite nice. I'm still deciding on whether it's going to be a table decoration like this, or whether I need to turn it into a wall sculpture or create a base and turn it to a freestanding sculpture. That I'm undecided on, but this gives you a general idea on what you can do with your own mould, plastic bags and a bit of resin. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for watching.